Hello, my gamerly friends. I am SigTrent, game designer, co-creator of Everyday Heroes, and Hoopy Frood for SigTrent Games. Today I'm going to tell you what's going on with SigTrent Games in this week 42 of our operations. I will offer you a little bit of game design advice, and we'll talk about the secrets of life, the universe, and everything. So let's see what's going on with SigTrent Games. It's been another busy week, which is great. Shotgun Fantasy is proceeding afoot. I bought 16 new pieces of stock art for the book, and I've got about 20 more to go, I think, for my overall art plan. It looks like my outlay for this is going to be around like $200+, so maybe $215, two and change, something like that. I spent about half of that on the first set of art. I'm going to get the rest at about $5 a shot. The ones that I bought initially are ones that I can use over and over again, so the license allows me to reuse them. And the ones that I'm about to buy for $5 are going to be just one-use license, so they'll appear in Shotgun Fantasy and nowhere else unless I pay another $5, which, you know, if they're really good and I need them again, I may very well do that since I'll have already downloaded them. So that's pretty cool. Just to put it in perspective, $200 is about what I paid for one character piece for the original art for the book. So you can you can do books with stock art at a lot less price than you do for commissioning original art. Now, I'm always still going to try to get at least one original piece for every book that we do, and as I can increase the sales of the books, then I can afford to grow that. Also, I'll be able to stock art that I can reuse can appear in multiple books, so long as it's appropriate for the book subject. And then that way, that frees up more budget in order to be able to do original art. Eventually, I would like to have books that have all original art in them because I want artists to be as involved with this as I am as a writer and game designer, but it's going to take time to get to that kind of financial level. Shotgun Fantasy is probably going to struggle to make its money back in its initial PDF sales, but hopefully as we build it out and get ready to do a print version of the book, then that could pay everything back in time, or it could cost a lot more. We'll see how it goes. Always risky in this business, but it's something I love, and I want to build that up. Also, the thing is, even though the initial outlay might not make it back immediately, like in the first month or two, books, you can sell them again and again and again over time. So eventually, it has a good chance of making back what is invested and hopefully making a little bit of, I don't know, we'll call it profit. Not sure if you, when all the work that goes into it, can you really call it profit? Probably, I guess, but in the long run, I hope that it works out well. I've got high hopes for Shotgun Fantasy, and I think people are really going to enjoy it. Everyday Pirates, I have finished the first draft, so that's great. That was my goal from last week, and I got that done, and I'm really happy with the way it all came together. It is a little over my word budget. I'm not going to charge more than I promised for in the contract, but I'm hoping that they can print some of that extra material because I think it's really good. Goober's taking a look at it now. I'm going to be doing a little bit of playtesting and fine-tuning. The ship combat is a little bit unusual. It uses slightly different rules. They'll all be familiar to you, but they will be just slightly tweaked. And I want to make sure ship combat comes out in a certain way. We're going to talk about that later in the game design tips, so we'll get into detail on that. I'm hoping it's pretty good, but it does need a little bit of playtesting to see if I've got it dialed in correctly for what my goals are. Mystery project, I did the math on the words that needed to be written still and the time that I have to write it, and I'm not as behind as I thought I was. So I thought I was in a severe kind of crunch situation, but I'm actually not. I've still got a pretty good amount of runway, so long as I keep working on that. That should be good. I talked to the people who commissioned it, and I was kind of like waiting to get some feedback. Sometimes that's kind of hard when you're a writer. You're like, am I on the right track, right? And then it's hard to get people's attention to say, yes, good job. So I did finally get a little bit of feedback. It turns out my editor was not feeling well lately, hasn't been doing a lot of stuff. So the producer came in and answered some of the questions that I needed to answer in order to go forward. So I feel good about that. I kind of got permission to use a little creativity in massaging the outline, massaging the word counts to get things exactly how I want them to be. So that's good. You just don't know when you start a contract how much wiggle room you have, and so I got enough that I can do what I need to do. So that's great. So that's going really well. I'm looking forward to someday talking about it. I think I'll be done by the time I can talk about it, though. Some companies, it takes a really long time from the time a product gets initially idealized to it actually gets out to the public and they're ready to market it. So there can be a bit of a gap there. All right, layout contract. We are underway on that and is working on that as we speak. So that is great. And Night Magic's, nothing to report there, but I am going to kick that up a notch soon. Shotgun Fantasy is going to go into layout, which means it's in Anne's hands instead of mine for a little while. And Everyday Pirates is all done, so that just means I have Mystery Project and Night Magic. So I will be able to focus on those two things a little more heavily and move them along nicely. All right, game design tip of the week. This is going to be, I'm titling it Designing Backwards. And it's really related to something I talked about before, which is goal-oriented design. So it's maybe another way to say that, designing backwards. But when you're doing mechanics, sometimes it's even more literal because you're like, okay, I want combats to take like 3 turns. How do I make it so a normal combat goes 3 turns? Not every combat necessarily, but that's just kind of the middle ground that you're shooting for. And let's say 50% of combats take that long. So it's about setting a goal for the way that you want the game to feel and what kind of outcome you want from a particular game system. And obviously, because there's going to be luck involved in an RPG and decision makings that affect those outcomes, you're not saying, okay, the characters always succeed or the characters always fail or that kind of thing. But you're saying about like how often do I want them to succeed? How often do I want them to fail? What do I want it to feel like when you succeed? What do I want it to feel like when you fail? That kind of thing. So you want to set up those kinds of goals and then work backwards from that to try and create a system that will attain those goals. And then you're also going to have goals for like how does it feel the whole way through, and that's a little less working backwards, right? But it's all about sort of starting with those end goals in mind and then being very deliberate about designing a system that's going to achieve those end goals. Now, what a lot of new designers do, because they're just not necessarily thinking about it in this way, is they'll kind of start with the beginning and they're like, okay, well, what do I roll for my ability scores? And here's the ability scores I want to have, and here's the number range I'm going to have, and so here's what dice I'm going to roll, without knowing why you're doing that, why you're setting those numbers, why you're using those dice, why you have those specific ability scores picked out, other than it's just kind of what feels right to you, and then you see where you go from there. Okay, well, those are my ability scores. What do I roll on attacks? Okay, this. So that's kind of front-forward design, and while it can be a lot of fun and it's sort of intuitive, it might take you to places you don't want to go and put you into difficult situations where you have to go back and second guess and refigure those things. However, if you start at the end point and then you work backwards, you're going to get a system that does everything you want it to do in the end. And then you might be a little surprised about what it looks like on the front, like the stats that the players are going to see or something, because the reason they are the way they are is because it's going to get you to where you need to go. And then it's a question of labeling and figuring out the names of things so that it all makes sense through the mechanical system. All right, so we're going to do a little exercise in how this works by talking about what I did for Everyday Pirates. And unfortunately, I have a lot of goals to talk about here. So I'm going to list all the goals, and I'm going to talk on each goal how I tried to go and achieve that. So first of all, one goal is to involve everybody in the ship in the combat system at least a little bit. Even if your character is a cook in the galley, you could have a role to play during ship-to-ship combat. Number 2 is you need to feel some drama and story during the ship-to-ship combat. I don't want it to just be a bunch of numbers. I want it to be more of a storytelling experience. Number 3 is I want tactics and luck to both matter in the outcome of a ship-to-ship encounter. So if you choose the right kind of tactics and you are lucky, then you will definitely succeed. If you are unlucky and you choose poor tactics, then that will give you a much worse chance of succeeding. You will probably lose. So I want those things to matter, but I also still want luck to play a part because that is the nature of role-playing game, and spontaneous storytelling, the good and the bad outcomes, help you imagine the cool things that happen and keep it fresh and unpredictable. All right, it should not take a really long time. I don't want ship combat to be this big tactical encounter that takes like 2 hours to get through. That would be very bad. I would say a ship-to-ship encounter could maybe take on the upper side an hour at the most. On the minimum, I want it to take like 10 to 15 minutes. It just sort of depends on what happens and how involved the encounter gets. A duel to the death between two ships might take a little bit longer than if somebody's just trying to flee or somebody is trying to board and capture the other ship. Just because there are more things that can happen, right? Number 5, some complex conflicts should feel almost hopeless. So if you're going against a ship of the line, which is the top Age of Sail warship of that time, in a little pirate sloop, and you're trying to do a gun battle, you're gonna lose, right? Like, it's not gonna happen. That is kind of like, having your little, CR one half orc, and he's gonna fight a CR10 dragon. It's not gonna work out for you very well. Now, you could probably use the sloop and you could escape from the giant man of war. That's a pretty realistic outcome, right? But if you're going head to head and trying to battle it, that's probably not going to go well. So that's, I guess, part of the tactical thing, but it was an important element that I had in my mind. Losing doesn't always mean death in a ship-to-ship combat. The truth is a lot of sailors survive these kinds of combats. You might end up adrift. You might end up captured. It's not really necessarily an everybody dies kind of a situation. If the ship goes down, that's not a total loss for the characters. It's not the end of the campaign, that kind of thing. So it's not a particularly deadly system to the players, but it could result in injuries or a loss of their objectives, and they have to regroup, get another ship, and try again. I wanted to feel like sailing feels in a pirate movie or in a naval combat movie from the Age of Sail, like Master and Commander, that kind of a thing. So I want to use elements from real life that are used in Hollywood that can then be brought out in the game. Finally, I want the mechanics used in this system to be at least familiar to the players. They need to be 5e or 5e adjacent rules. Now, I'm known for bending and changing things as I think fits the game design best, and creating slightly bespoke systems, and this is definitely one of those, but I don't want it to be too far afield and feel like it's a totally different game. It needs to feel like Everyday Heroes. All right, so let's talk a little bit on each topic about how I did this and how I approached it and designed backwards. So, involving everyone on the ship at least a little bit, this is a problem that was largely solved for me. Brian C.B. Steele and Goober and I working on Intergalactic Heroes. Brian especially, though, championed a system where we had these starship encounters, and they were a little bit based on the way that chases work, but modified a little bit. And so it's a series of tasks that need to be performed. Usually skill checks, but sometimes attack rolls, sometimes saving throws, different things like that. So, for instance, you want to fire up the warp engines, right? So somebody's going to make a roll, and there's a little number that indicates how many people can participate. Maybe firing up the warp engines, only one person can do it. You got to have the engineer, but maybe 3 characters can participate in running around the warp engine deck and trying to get it ready and helping out each other. So, just kind of depends. And there's a little bit of strategy in them because they come in a particular order. Some are going to affect later rolls. So maybe they'll change the difficulty of the encounter. Maybe they are going to give somebody else an additional roll or an advantage or a reroll or whatever it is. But they are going to affect how things play out through the encounter so that there's a little bit of strategy involved in choosing what you do. And you can kind of divvy up everybody so that everyone's got a roll. So we've got that. I also made room in this so that the crew can participate as well, because you're on a pirate ship, you've got the player characters, but there also might be other people in your crew. They might be basic NPCs, or it might just be, there's like 50 guys on this ship. What are they doing during all this? Well, the crew can make rolls during these events. Especially this is good if none of the players have a relevant skill, but of course the sailors are good at sailing. So you can assign the sailors to do tasks as well. You don't have to, but it's always an option. The sailors, your general crew, can only participate in any given event once. So you kind of use them. They've got an average set of skills, and there are rules about your crew and their crew morale and their experience, so they can have different numbers that they roll on these, whether they're a really good crew or whether they're a really green and experienced crew that doesn't know what they're doing. So that's how we do that. Number 2, feel some drama during combat. So for that, each of the events has a little bit of a short description to say exactly what is happening during this event. And like I said, I encourage the game master in the text of the rule book to describe what's happening, not just roll the dice, but kind of get into it. Oh, the wind's blowing hard. The ship rocks hard from side to side as the sailors fail to manage the sails, right? And so the ship is wildly off course, and the enemy is starting to slip away. Right, great. So because there was a roll and the roll failed, and so you're going to narrate something bad that's happening on the ship, you need it to have that kind of drama. And because each of the events is going to have a particular consequence, there's just sort of a natural fail-success state that creates that drama and tension, and you can understand how it's affecting the overall story of the ships dueling each other on the sea. Number 3, we've got tactics, and luck should determine the outcome. So luck is easy. It's a D20 system, so there's going to be rolls. They're going to be kind of swingy, so that's right built in there. Tactics are important, and the way that I tried to do that is as follows. So I don't know if you've ever done my dueling system. It has a little tactical grid where the 2 people at play choose a different strategy. This is a very simplified version of that because there's only real 3 strategies you pursue in your ship. One is to run away, right? You don't want to be in this encounter. You want to get away from there. And that's definitely something that will happen for a small pirate crew being chased by a Royal Navy or something like that. You don't want a piece of that. Number 2 is to try and board the enemy ship. This is the thing that pirates want to do almost all the time, is to sail up to the other ship, jump on board, get the other crew to surrender, either by fighting or just being intimidating, and then take over the ship, either take the ship itself as prize, or just take some of the goods that are on the ship, get them on your pirate ship and sail away. So that's a main goal that pirates have, so that's one of the strategies that you can have, and you're trying to avoid enemy fires. You do that. Now, you might take some pot shots or something, but we'll get to that. The third one is gunning, so you want to shoot at the enemy ship. And when you shoot at the enemy ship, you don't have to decide right away. You can decide once you start shooting them. You're going to shoot at their sails to slow them down. You can shoot at their decks to try and thin the crew, and reduce the cannon fire that they can shoot. Or you can shoot down at the waterline and try to sink the ship. And each of them has advantages and disadvantages and a different outcome. And so a lot will depend on what's going to happen based on your choice. And so the Game Master is then going to decide what the NPC ship is trying to do. The Royal Navy is trying to sink your pirate ship, or board the pirate ship, or merchant fleets trying to escape from your pirates, whatever it might happen to be. And then there's a little grid that says which of the provided event chains that you're going to do. They're called ship events. And so, if both ships are trying to shoot at each other, then it's a gun duel, I think it's called. I don't remember the exact names of these things that I made. And so you go down to that ship event and you do the ship event. And there's between 4 and 6 steps for any given ship event. And they're almost like a little choose your way adventure sort of a thing. But again, everybody's going to get a chance to participate in one or more of these events. Everybody can usually participate in running the sails, right? So that's something that on a ship is super important. Everybody can kind of get involved on it. But there are some things that are reserved for the captain or the leader of the ship, or a navigator or somebody like that who are doing something special in this event. And so they go through the event. During the event, what can happen is the other ship is going to get an opportunity to do things that the Game Master decided that the enemy ship wants to do. So if the crew does poorly in some fashion, then the enemy is going to get an opportunity to do something bad to you, whatever it is they want to do, whether it's board your ship, shoot at you, or escape, right? So you're both trying to prevent that from happening, and you are trying to achieve the goal that you set. And each of the events is designed to incorporate the enemy's objectives and the player's objectives into the one event, but it's very player focused, so all the storytelling and action is on the player. So in this system, you're not really taking enemy turns. The Game Master is not running the enemy ship specifically, other than deciding what their tactics are. And if they get a chance to make an attack roll with their cannons, then the Game Master is going to do that and resolve the damage. Okay, so tactics and luck, I'm combining there. It shouldn't take a long time. So this was a little tricky because certainly this kind of a system could take a little while to work out. Each ship event has, like I said, have a few different roles and things and decisions for the players to make. So they're pretty involved. So the answer to not making it take a long time was not to have a lot of ship actions happen. So ship events. So each of these ship events that takes place should be a pretty strong resolution, especially if you are trying to board a ship. So there's a pretty good chance of succeeding if you're trying to board a ship. And there are many opportunities to make that happen, to make it easier for the most important roles to occur, to where you do indeed board the ship. There is a chance of failure, of course. There's also a chance you get lit up if the enemy is trying to shoot you while you're trying to board them. So bad things can still happen, but it leans towards the success of whatever strategy, and that is both true for the players, and it is somewhat true for the enemy ships as well. They have a little bit lower chance of success, because the players are going to put everything they have into trying to succeed at their event, which is going to deny the enemy their opportunity to do stuff. But there are some instances, especially being shot at, that you might not be able to avoid. You can just sort of mitigate them and make it less bad, instead of totally bad. And when it comes to being shot at or shooting, the chances of hitting from ship-to-ship combat are very high. You're not going to miss very often, so you're almost always going to land a hit. And so long as your ship has the kind of guns that are capable of damaging the enemy ship, meaning you're using pretty big guns against a pretty big ship or small guns against a small ship, you have a very high chance of scoring significant damage. And if you are in a big old monster ship and you are fighting some guys in a canoe and you hit the canoe, which is a little less chance of that happening, the canoe is gone, right? Like, it's very decisive. So one exchange of gunfire might be enough to finish a battle or to get the enemy to decide that it's not worth it and they surrender. So you're probably not going to be doing a bunch of these ship events. Hopefully, maybe a maximum, kind of like a combat round of like 3 or so to resolve an encounter, but often one will be enough to get the job done, right? Okay, so next up is some conflicts are almost hopeless. And I talked about this a little bit, and that was dialing in the damage and the hit points for the ship. Yes, these ships are going to have hit points. They are used in a slightly different way. They're a little bit more like a damage threshold. So I didn't want people to be keeping track of hit points and damage on ships all the time. There's a little bit of that, because if you just pepper lightly a ship but you don't do significant damage, that damage is going to carry over to your next shot and add to whatever your next shot damage is, representing like you weaken them up, soften them up a little bit, but it wasn't quite enough to do anything important, and the next time it's going to add. But other than that, if you do more damage than hit points, then certain conditions happen on the ship. There's damage to sails, damage to the deck, damage to the hull, and these have important consequences. Much like in the vehicle system, there are 3 levels, and when you get to the 3rd level, you're done. No sails. Not everybody on the deck is dead, but you can't fire cannons, and most of the people are down, or the ship is sinking if you do the damage to the hull. So there's not a whole lot of leeway there. It's very decisive, pretty fast, and if you decide to get shot at by a really big ship and you're not in a very big ship, you could be some very serious consequences very quickly. So maybe don't do that. Try to run away. Small ships do have a good chance of outrunning bigger ships and outmaneuvering them, so that's probably your best bet. Losing doesn't always mean death. So in most of this, there are some dire consequences to the crew of your ship if they're getting lit up by cannon fire. You will suffer casualties. Casualties don't necessarily mean the crew is dead, but it does mean they are out of the fight. Players can also take damage during ship combat when they're on deck and the ship is under fire. Other than that, they don't really do it. Now, when you get into a boarding engagement, that just becomes kind of a normal combat. There's a set of rules for how the masses of crew on each ship, if there are masses of crew, fighting each other will inflict casualties. That's very simplified so that you can stay focused on the player action. But the game master is encouraged to just bring some NPCs out of the crew, some generic pirates, some officers, and, you know, if they're important NPCs, to bring them out. The players fight them while the crew just sort of battle amongst themselves. And eventually it mostly matters if the PCs win, but of course if your crew gets decimated and their crew still has like 30 guys, then this could be a really long fight. Probably not going to go well for the players, so you probably don't want to do that. Generally, pirates always go into engagements that they think they can win, and most of the time the enemy surrenders because you've got 50 guys and they got 4 guys, and they're like, no, we're not fighting those guys. So it's usually pretty decisive. But losing doesn't usually mean death. Most of the time at sea, they'll take people prisoners. They're not out to just murder everybody, although that can happen. And so it's consequential, but it's not necessarily lethal, because I wanted it to be possible to lose these ship battles. I guess that's something I didn't talk about exactly, but not in the campaign. Or maybe that's exactly the topic I'm on. All right. Next up, feels like a movie. So yeah, that was something that I had to scale back. So originally I had rules about wind direction, because sailing ships are either designed to sail into the wind or sail with the wind. And different kinds of sails are optimal for each of these choices. And I wanted to have a table where you roll what direction the wind is going, and then you see what kind of sails you have, and you get advantages and disadvantages in these ship events. But A, I ran over my word count, and B, it was a level of detail that ended up not mattering in most of the ship events, because most of the time, if there's a chase, the ships are sailing in the same direction. So they're still gonna, if you're going upwind, you're still gonna have relatively poor speeds, and if you're going downwind, you'll have relatively the same speeds. If your ship is specifically rigged for something, then you'll be a little better at it, but it was like the difference of 5% in the outcome of any given roll on a ship event, and it was like, Not worth the complexity, right? To add that in, it's not going to feel like a pirate movie. So that got the axe, and it went away. Now I still do have weather. There's a weather chart, but the weather is a little bit more sort of like planning your sailing. So if the weather is dead calm and there's no wind, you are not sailing. You better have a rowboat. But that's a great opportunity if you got pirates in a canoe to go get yourself a sailing ship because they're kind of dead in the water. Or if there's a big storm, nobody's engaging in ship combat. You won't be able to see each other probably, and you'll just be wrestling for your life. Not all the ship events are based on combat. There is a ship event that is based on looking for targets, right? You're searching the seas for the enemy. There is also a ship event on riding out the storm. And depending on the severity of the storm, the difficulties of the DCs go up significantly. So if you want to take your ship out into a hurricane, or the game master is mean enough to throw a hurricane on you, it's pretty bad. We also encourage the game master to roll about a week of weather in advance. There's a little weather table. You can randomly determine weather, depending on whether it's the rainy season or the dry season. And during the rainy season, of course, the Caribbean is famous for hurricanes, so you can have a hurricane come up. And the game master can roll on the weather, and then that way, the players are trying to predict the weather. They can see the storm coming, maybe, or maybe they get caught by surprise because they may fail their weather roll, their survival roll. So lots of different things can happen on the ship, and you can use these events inside of a structured ship-to-ship combat, or you can just use them generally for a moment-to-moment event that happens to happen during play. So all kinds of good stuff there. I think they feel pretty cinematic and like a movie. The thing that I need to playtest a little bit is just how long it takes to get through it, especially if you're a new player, and also just kind of the combat outcomes when relatively equal ships are shooting at each other. Like I said, I need that. I need it to feel biting, and most of the time something significant happens. But there is still a chance that if you get shot and hit with cannon fire, it doesn't do a lot of damage, and you're okay. So we'll see how that goes. And I want to make sure the record keeping should be pretty simple. I wanted to keep, this is not a goal on my list, but I wanted to keep the record keeping for the ship combat to be less for the game master than a regular combat. And part of that is because they do have to kind of manage the ship event and run through that as a scenario, so that's something they need on the screen. And you're also going to need to be able to have a reference of the effects of the ship damage and note down a damaged ship and what its penalties are. It's a little less of an issue for the enemy ship, but there is a mechanic when you're setting the difficulty class for a ship event. If the other ship has a weakness to their dexterity or their strength, speed, or maneuverability, then that is going to make the ship events harder or easier, depending on how that, whether they're damaged or whether you're damaged, right? Whoever's damaged is going to have a disadvantage going into the ship event, and that's going to make everything in it more of a struggle, right? So it is a pretty big effect. All right, so that's how I worked backwards in Everyday Pirates, starting with the goals and then moving into the mechanics and how I decided to implement them. All right, great. Let's talk about what kind of games I've been playing this week, and that's going to be No Man's Sky. Still playing that, still enjoying the heck out of it. I played another one of the expeditions. These are kind of like a way to start the game. You can play your main character, but they kind of strip them down, and then they go on a little adventure, and then they can come back when they're completed the whole thing, come back to the mainline play. But I find it's better just to make a new character to do it, because it's kind of fun to start a new character. And you do the expedition, and then your main save, as they usually call it in No Man's Sky, gets the benefit of a lot of the things that were discovered. Maybe not the money and like ships and things, but there will be special unlocks that otherwise are not available except by doing expeditions. And those unlocks are available to all your characters. So it's a really well thought out system. Very cool. It's sort of like, how do we encourage people to make new characters, but also make it so what the new character is doing benefits the other character that people are trying to progress in a progression-based game? Well, there you go. It's a good way to do it. So, and how do we encourage people to play through the early game loops again in order to get high-level achievements and stuff? There you go. Another way to do that. Really well implemented. I think it's a great game system, and I had a ton of fun with it. There's like 20 of these things. I've done 2 of them now, so lots more to come. Very cool. Also, every time I do one, I learn some new game mechanics. So they also kind of serve as a little tutorial for people. This is a very obtuse game. It does not tell you how to play it. You can use the wiki and videos and stuff, of course, to learn every little intricate detail. But you can pick it up in the game over time if you are 1, attentive, 2, curious, and 3, try all the different things that the game is encouraging you to try to do. I built a living ship, which is the cool quest you get. You get these little ship seeds, and then you go on a quest to mature them into an alien space fighter that you can fly around in. So I finished the first time doing one of those. You can do them multiple times to get different variations of the ship. And that was pretty fun. I did enjoy that. I've also been chasing pirate dreadnoughts. Pirate dreadnoughts are really cool looking capital ships. And then you can use those to base your fleet out of and put a base inside of your capital ship, which is cool. Sort of like a traveling planetary base. And so I've been trying to get a pirate dreadnought because they look really neat, although I need one that's a higher class or equal class to the more regular dreadnought that I already have. Anyway, it's just a game about chasing cool things that you want to try to achieve. I was having a lot of fun with it. Haven't played any other games. Been working, and No Man's Sky, that's about it. New Man Ann has been playing Phasmophobia over on her Twitch channel. There's a new map, which is a cool diner, and I've been watching her play a little bit of that. I'm watching the streamers she likes to play, playing that. It looks really fun. And, of course, she's been playing No Man's Sky, and she's been streaming that. That's on Twitch for Nomad Ann. All right, life in general. So this week I sprained my ankle. It really hurt badly. It was weird because I didn't... It's like I did some stuff probably at work, at the gift shop, that probably aggravated my ankle. And then it started to stiffen up as the day went on. It was hurting a little bit while I was at work. And then as I was sleeping, it locked up and became amazingly painful, and I woke up. Now I can sleep through a lot of pain, and so then when I wake up, I feel horrible, though. It's like the stress just sort of builds up, and my foot was on fire. I could barely stand. It was really bad. And so I had to take some time off of the gift shop work, which did let me do a little bit more work at home on Pirates, which is great. But the pain was significant. So I mostly played No Man's Sky in order to kind of succor myself. But it got better. I treated it really gently and wrapped it up when I did go back to work on Sunday, and it's feeling much better now. So anyway, the story of my ankle, not really a great trivia, but I don't always have a lot to talk about in this section, so there we go. I spent a lot of time sending emails this week, coordinating the different contracts those have, trying to work out with the secret project to try and get all of that worked out, because I had a lot of questions and I was kind of stuck, not able to move forward, so I got unblocked, so that's really good. Negotiating contracts and stuff like that, and digging around, talking to artists about the licenses for their stock art, so on and so forth. So that was about all that was going on this week. It was a very work-focused week. I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving coming up. I hope you have some friends and family to spend it with, or you get to spend time at home just doing whatever you like to do and not be bothered by anybody else. Both of these are great pleasures. I will be going into town to see my good friends Jeff and Kate Grubb and all the people that surround them for Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm really looking forward to that. I haven't seen them in a while. Normally we get together different times during the summer for board gaming, and I just wasn't able to do it because those weekends where there's a holiday are the big ones at the gift store, and I just can't go. So that's too bad. Fortunately, Thanksgiving, not a super busy day at the gift store. Most of the business happens during the summer, so I was able to take that off and just enjoy this week. Yeah, and I promised to talk about Life, the Universe, and Everything. The answer to the ultimate question of Life, the Universe, of Everything is, of course, in the video title. You are welcome. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye, everybody.